This story shook Germany back in 2008, when nurse Niels Hagel, nicknamed Dr. Death, was suspected of killing a patient who was prescribed a lethal dose of medication by a psychopathic doctor, but Germans had no idea that Dr. Death could become the most mass murderer in Europe. Today, he is suspected of committing 106 murders. However, this list is not complete. As it turned out later, Hagel regularly injected his patients with lethal doses of drugs and did it not for profit, but out of vanity, to heroically resuscitate them at the last moment and boast of success in front of colleagues. However, more often than not, the experiments failed and people died. Investigators conducted 174 exhumations, but many possible victims were cremated. The investigation believes that, in fact, Hagel could have killed at least 300 people. Niels Hagel was born in 1977 in the most ordinary German family. His father worked as an elderly in the local hospital. His mother was a cleaner. According to the memories of classmates, Niels didn't stand out except that he was a kind of sullen, but the boy entertained himself a little strange, always alone listening to the radio tuned to the police wave, imagining himself a tough gangster who always cleverly escapes from police traps. After high school, Niels decided to become a nurse at the College of Ballet Hospital. He couldn't go to study to be a doctor because he needed money, which his family never had, so Niels decided to work as a nurse first, to gain experience, save up some money, and then think about medical school. In 1998, when he finished his studies, he got a job at the Red Cross Clinic. Then he went to work as a nurse and assistant anesthesiologist in the intensive care unit in cardiology in Oldenburg. However, Hagel was soon plagued by misfortune. First, his father died of a heart attack, and then his pregnant wife was killed in a car accident. Apparently, it was then that he decided to take revenge on the whole world by killing those who, in his opinion, didn't deserve the love of their loved ones. Hagel remembered his first victim very well, 63-year-old Bridget Undent. The woman was admitted to the clinic with the arrhythmia. The woman came accompanied by her daughter, who didn't even pay attention to Niels, and the one before the operation discreetly let the patient's unnoticed medication, from which she died on the way to the operating room. Immediately after the first murder, Hagel was terrified of being caught. He'd flinch at his own shadow and flinch at any noise, at any rustle. It seemed to the criminal that all the time he must have left some traces, but time passed, no police came for him, and from there Niels realized that he had found the perfect environment for hunting his victims with impunity. Subsequently, forensic psychiatrist who investigated the maniac suggested that Niels killed simply out of boredom. But he was wondering whether this particular patient would die of a drug overdose or not, whether he would be caught, or whether he had developed the perfect method of killing. If the murder of the 63-year-old woman had been investigated and solved, further death could have been avoided, but it never occurred to anyone that someone could have intentionally administered a lethal dose of the drug to an elderly woman. It was at that moment that Niels Hagel got a taste of impunity. However, colleagues still paid attention that the mortality rate in the intensive care unit during his work almost doubled, but these suspicions at first somehow went into the shadows. Against the background of a fantastic skill with which Hagel literally pulled patients from the other side of the world, doctors really appreciated the incredible clarity that nurse engaged in his work. He was even nicknamed Rambo Reanimatologe. However, in this skill was nothing surprising, because only Niels knew what drugs led the patient and what to do, and no one else. So strange did all the cases of rescue seem. Eventually, his colleagues informed the hospital administration about these incidents, but they all didn't report to the police. He wasn't even dismissed, but simply asked to leave in exchange for promising to give an excellent characterization. Soon Niels arrived at the nearby Oldenburg Delmenhorst with such impressive references that the management of the clinic had nothing to do but to hire him immediately. In addition, and in conversations with Hagel's new colleagues, the staff of the Oldenburg hospital praised him with fervent fervor. In the second clinic in Delmenhorst, the murderer worked longer. His modus operandi remained the same. He found elderly patients or those suffering from particularly serious illnesses and injected a huge dose of powerful drugs, usually used in severe cases of hypertension or arrhythmia. To prevent the effects of the drugs from being detected immediately, he would disable life support systems and heart rate and blood pressure sensors, and then just sit there and wait for the victim to die. The drugs caused a heart attack, and sometimes the patient died in the arms of Hagel, who did his best to pretend to fight for the patient's life. For a long time, the nurse remained beyond suspicion, and this even despite the fact that of 411 deaths recorded in the hospital during the work of Hagel, 321 came on his watch. The killer was caught right at the scene of the crime by chance. On June 24, 2005, a nurse at Delmenhorst City Hospital entered the room of one of the patients and was surprised to see her colleague Niels Hagel leaning over him, who actually had nothing to do in the room. This was not the only oddity. The nurse found that the life support systems were turned off, and on the table there were 4 empty ampoules of a drug that had never been prescribed to the patient. She became alarmed and took the patient's blood just in case. The results came back the next day, and as a result, the patient had a dangerous concentration of a powerful heart drug in his blood, but by this time, he had already died. The clinic employee immediately reported her suspicions to the attending physician. They discussed the situation and decided to report the suspicious death to the police, but the nurse was allowed to work until the end of the shift. Amazingly, during this time, Niels managed to kill another patient. He was arrested only 2 days later. In 2008, Hagel was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. In 2012, while serving his sentence, Hagel told a cellmate that he had actually killed many people. The cellmate told the prison director about this conversation, and a new investigation was launched against Niels. At the beginning of June 2019, the Oldenburg court found Niels Hagel guilty of the murder of 85 patients and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The investigators also focused on the responsible employees of the hospital where Niels Hagel committed his crimes at different times. For example, according to the prosecutors, the management of the hospital in Delmenhorst had precise evidence that Hagel killed patients, but chose to keep silent in order not to spoil the reputation of the hospital. 2 former senior doctors and a hospital administrator were soon on trial on charges of accessory to murder by exposure. In 2005, when Niels Hagel was already arrested, newspapers gave him a variety of predictable nicknames. For instance, Angel of Death or Nurse Killer. He killed, as they now believe, not because he wanted to be famous as a recitator, but actually Hagel was a narcissist of the worst form. He not only wanted to be famous, but also he was interested in the game itself. He liked that he decides who lives, who dies, and who rises from the dead. He liked to play God. The lawyers, on the other hand, assured the jury that Dr. Death felt pity for his victims. He killed them because he didn't want them to suffer in hospital wards, fading away every day from hopelessness and inability to overcome the disease. Nonsense, but some jurors even felt sorry for him. According to psychologists, it was all the fault of stress. His father died of a heart attack. Well, maybe it was true. When he saw how tenderly the daughter takes care of her mother, a wave of black envy literally overwhelmed him with a hat. Why? As if an inner voice screamed in his head, why do some people get everything and you only poverty? Unbearable pain and suffering, and then the thirst for revenge in his soul as if burnt out, leaving only the bitter ash of disappointment, and Niels became simply bored. The reason for his experiments was just some boredom, wondering if this patient would die of a drug overdose or not, if he would be caught, or wondering if he had developed the perfect way to kill people. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. There are many interesting and shocking stories ahead.